Alright, all three Salvage-o-Matics are on sale right now, so I figured this is as good a time as any to make a video about them and who would want to or maybe wouldn't want to buy them at all. Before we dive into the numbers and use cases, it's important for you to understand what they actually do. All three of them do what the name implies, of course, salvage items. Their difference lies in the chances of rarer materials and the chances of salvaging upgrades. Most people understand the first part of what they do, namely give you a chance at recovering rare materials, most notably globs of ectoplasm. The salvaging upgrades part often seems to be a source of confusion, especially once we start talking about the Runecrafters. The upgrades mentioned are the runes or sigils that might be present in your armor and weapons, or the gemstones in trinkets. The word salvage is key. You will not be recovering the rune or sigil from your armor or weapon, you will be destroying it and getting their base components in return. This means that you will always get back loosened modes for runes and sigils, and have a small chance of getting charms or symbols on top as well. If you salvage a trinket with a gemstone, the gemstone should be recovered to your inventory, as those cannot be salvaged to base materials. But I'm gonna be honest, I've never used the Runecrafters on a trinket before, or not that I can remember, so I'm not sure. With those definitions out of the way, let's take a look at the difference between the three. A copper-fed Salvage-o-Matic has a 10% chance of returning rarer materials and a 20% chance of salvaging the aforementioned upgrades. It requires 3 copper per use and usually costs 800 gems on the gem store, but right now is reduced to 640. Its non-gem store equivalent is a basic salvage kit, which would cost you 88 copper for 25 uses. The Runecrafters has a 20% chance of returning rarer materials, so double that of the copper-fed, and a 100% chance of salvaging the upgrades. It'll cost you 30 copper per use and is usually 600 gems on the store, but right now it's only 480. This one does not have a non-gem store equivalent, which makes it rather unique. The Silver-Fed has a 25% chance of rarer materials and an 80% chance of salvaging the upgrades. Despite its name, it actually costs 60 copper per use and is usually 500 gems on the gem store, but is discounted to 400 right now. And this one has 2 non-gem store equivalents actually. A Master Salvage Kit, which will cost you a little over 15 silver or 5600 karma for 25 uses, and a Mystic Salvage Kit, which has a whopping 250 uses but needs to be combined in the Mystic Forge. I will get to the gem cost in a bit, but let's first understand what the salvage rates would actually mean for you. As a rule of thumb, you'll want to use a copper-fed on fine or blue gear, the Runecrafters on masterwork or green gear, and the Silver-Fed on rare or yellow gear. Simple as that. And that's because level 68 and above rares are what they call ecto-producing items. So the 25% chance of a Silver-Fed will give you a better chance of acquiring globs of ectoplasm than the 10% of a copper-fed. The difference between 10 and 25%, or even 20 and 25, can be small or large depending on the type of player you are. See, if you rarely salvage items, you'll probably still notice the difference in salvage rates, but it won't impact your overall gold gained or missed out on too much. If you're the kind of player who salvages everything instead of selling on the trading post or to a vendor, then the difference between the salvage rates will start to add up. If you only take one thing away from this video, by the way, is that you want to make sure to use the Silver-Fed or Masters or Mystic kit on rare or yellow items. I already largely covered what salvaging an upgrade means. A lot of people tend to get disappointed when they discover that they don't get the upgrades sent to their inventory, like a Black Lion salvage kit would do, but rather the base components. Salvaging upgrades can make you quite a bit of gold if you're doing it en masse and at the right price. That's why the Runecrafters is such a popular item to process green unidentified gear. By the way, you always want to first identify gear and only then salvage it. Identifying gear has a chance to give you an upgraded piece as well. So you could be missing out on yellows if you're directly salvaging green unidentified gear. When you identify green gear, you'll notice that they almost always come with an upgrade inside, and the Runecrafter's 100% chance of salvaging those means you'll at least end up with loosened modes and a small chance of charms or symbols. The wiki has some numbers if you're wondering exactly how small the chance is, and I presume the Barons probably have some private data that will be far more exact. So now you know why you should use a copper-fed on blues, a Runecrafters on greens and a Silver-Fed on yellows. But that does not answer the question whether it's actually worth it or not. I'm gonna say that for 99% of the players, you're going to be paying for convenience, not to get your actual money's worth out of these. I bought all three when they were originally introduced and I have zero regrets. That's because I'm a sucker for convenience and I actually kinda like processing my gear myself. If you look at it from a pure cost perspective, unless you run some kind of an industrial operation, you will never ever recover the equivalent gold value of what you put into them. Allow me to explain. The wiki states that you would need to use the Copper-Fed an approximate 5,180,000 times before it becomes actually cheaper to use than a basic salvage kit. But the wiki isn't up to date on the calculation. That was back when the gold to gem exchange rate was 33 silver and 67 copper. If you go and check the current rates in the gem store, you'll notice that it's almost triple. If you're now wondering how many times you salvaged items in general, you can go to your achievements tab and look for the Agent of Entropy achievement. The 5 million mentioned on the wiki means that you'd have to have completed that achievement 25,900 times. And the same goes for the Silver-Fed, by the way. The wiki states that you need to salvage at least 1,130,000 times before it becomes cheaper than using a master salvage kit, and even more when you're using a mystic salvage kit. They don't state what exchange rate they're using for this, but given that we're talking such a big number of salvages, I'm not even gonna bother and do the math, because I'm gonna assume that not a lot of players will have completed the Agent of Entropy achievement more than 1,000 or even 5,000 times. I am now genuinely curious how many times all of you have completed the achievement, so if you can, please let me know in the comments down below. So, should you buy them? And again, it's up to you. I love the convenience they provide, and from that point of view, I'd say the Copper-Fed will be a game changer, because salvaging all of the lower tier gear will immensely help declutter your inventory, especially if you can place it in a shared inventory slot. The Silver-Fed only if you like salvaging rares and above yourself. Using a Silver-Fed is actually only marginally better than listing the yellow unidentified gear on the trading post. So looking at this from a pure value perspective, I'd say the argument is rather weak. You might have noticed that I conveniently skipped over the Runecrafters. That's because I wanted to show you the same relevant numbers on the Fast website like I did for the Silver-Fed. You'll notice that selling stacks of unidentified greens on the trading post will actually net you more money than using a Runecrafters. The way people make gold by identifying green units is by using the Endless Upgrade Extractor, not a Runecrafter Salvage-o-Matic. And the Endless Extractor warrants a whole other video in itself. So now you know everything there is to know about the 3 Salvage-o-Matics. If you have any other comments or questions, feel free to ask them down below, and make sure you like, subscribe and name all of your ranger pets after me.